Shalom, family. Welcome to another Sabbath, another Room 144. This evening, we're going to be covering Christ, man, myth, or legend, right? Which we did already about 2 weeks, I think, 2 weeks ago. So this is part two. This is more of the historical accounts. It's possibly going to be a shorter lesson than the last one. Cover a couple of things. Cover a couple of artifacts, a couple of books, a couple of historians and such to prove the Most High Son outside the scriptures. But to open up, let me get John again. And I mean again, because if you didn't check out part one, check out part one. Part one was more scriptural. This is going to be more sources, secular sources. So whenever you get it out, 1 and 1. Yes, sir. How's everybody doing? The Wab, all praises.
Mic check. The book of John, chapter 1 and verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made.
All right, so we remember this from last class, I hope. And if we don't, you already know what this is, right? In the beginning was Christ, and the Word was with the Most High, and Christ was with the Most High, and Christ was a power. That's what the scripture is saying, right? And then it says the same was in the beginning with the Most High. Shalom, family. And then it says all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. We covered that the last class. Let's get 14 right quick.
Verse 14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.
Exactly. So we know who that is, right? Yay, nay. Hamashiach Yahweh Shai. Let me get Colossians real quick. Actually, before you go there, let's get Proverbs 8 and 22. The book of Proverbs 8 and 22. Again, if you haven't scoped out the first part one of this topic, go ahead and check it out so it can make more sense. I'm not gonna go too much into it this evening. More of the sources. Go ahead, Art.
The book of Proverbs,
8 and
chapter
22.
8, verse 22. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was.
Again, when you go into these chapters, into these verses, sometimes, Shalom, family, sometimes you might think it's just referring to wisdom, it's just referring to a particular topic, right? But it's like, it could be a double, it could be a triple type meaning that these scriptures have. I'm pretty sure you guys scoped that out, seen that already, right? So, twofold, sometimes threefold, right? Things that happened in the past, things that are happening, and things that are still prophecy to be fulfilled. So when you read these books right here, you got to look into it and really, in your studies, understand that it's talking about a present situation, for example, wisdom, but it's also talking about, our Savior, Hamashiach Yahweh Shai. So it says, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. And it says, I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. Also, again, talking about Yahweh Shai. Let's go from there. Let's get, let me get Colossians. Colossians 1 and 16.
The book of Colossians, chapter 1, and verse 16. And it reads, for by him were all things created, that are in the heaven and that are in the earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him.
So we did that, right? So I just brought these back real quick to give you a quick memory of what we covered last time. This time we're going to cover some of these on this PowerPoint. We're actually going to go through all the scriptures on the PowerPoint to see, and that's not even all the scriptures you have in regards to Yahweh Shai, but it's quite a few. And we're going to go through them right quick to prove that Yahweh Shai was in the Old Testament, that he's been and he comes in the volume of the book. And then we're going to go into some of the sources. So if you could pull up that first slide out. So we're going to go to Genesis 1 right quick. And just go down the list.
God. Genesis 1 and 26. God, the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image. Let us make man in our image.
Who do you think that us is referring to? We just read about it, right? We said like last time, the foreman, right? And he has his crew. But that us is talking about Yahweh Shai. So it says, and the Most High said, let us, him and Yahweh Shai, make man in our image. Go ahead.
Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth.
Now, when we read Colossians 1, we went straight into 16, right? It starts making sense when you start from the beginning. You probably read Genesis several times. Skip right over that, not understanding that it was talking about, Yahweh Shai. We ran into Genesis 49 last time. Remember that? And even before the Levitical priesthood, before the Levites, we cover that. So now it's talking about at the beginning, the Most High and Yahweh Shai said, let us make man in our image. A lot of the times we get caught up with the physical image. Well, what type of image do you think it was talking about? In what way? When you look into it, right, when you go to Isaiah 11, when you go into the wisdom of Solomon, his image, basically not literal physical image, but as far as you look at, when you go to Wisdom of Solomon 1 and chapter 2, you see that we were supposed to be immortal. We were supposed to be without sin. You can read it. And it'll say about, talking in regards to the image, that image of everlasting, which is when you look at Yahweh Shai, he actually came through, conquered death, was a prime example of blameless individual. We covered it last time in Hebrews, that it behooved them to be what? Made in what type of image? Type of way? Huh? Just like us. From the seed of man. From blood in the seed of man, like Wisdom of Solomon, what is it, 7 covers, I think? Wisdom of Solomon, 7 and 1. It says that there's no other way that any person has came into this earth besides a man and a female creating that individual, right? So this is not talking just in reference as far as the image that we think of, right? Because you'll get a bit confused if that's how you look at things. But again, this is Genesis. We're in Genesis 1:26, already from the beginning. That's why in Colossians it said that. In the book of John it says that. All throughout the scriptures it says the same thing. From the beginning, since the beginning, before anything was created, Yahweh Shai was here. So let's go from there. Let's go to the next one, all right? So just take these notes to show that, Yahweh Shai has been talked about since the beginning, all throughout the book. We covered John 1 and 1 through 3 already, so we could skip that. Let's go to Proverbs 30 and 4.
The book of Proverbs, chapter 30 and verse 4. Who hath ascended up into heaven? Or descended?
Listen to what you read, what the brother's reading, what we're reading, right? It says who? It's a question. The book of Proverbs. When was this around? Pre-Christ, after Christ, during Christ? What was that? That ain't trick questions, family. Before Christ, right? So before Christ, we're reading what again, Ak?
Book of Proverbs, chapter 30, and verse 4. Who hath ascended up into heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered up the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is his name?
Listen, what is his name? Go ahead.
And what is his son's name? If thou canst tell.
Y'all can't tell, right? Reading about the days of David, of King Solomon. If you know the story of King Solomon, what he asked for? What was it that he asked for? Wisdom. And he received it, right? And he received that along with all the other riches and so forth. But wisdom, he was one of the wisest individuals to exist. You have the account with the queen. And she came and said, man, what I knew about you was half of your greatness. And you look at all these things back in the day, right? The tribute that they were paying. She came through with all kinds of offerings just to come and see our forefather Solomon. So Solomon is coming through, and then in this book of Proverbs 30 and 4 is asking, look, who hath ascended up into the heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? What's his name? Yahweh. And then it says, what is his son's name? Yahweh Shai, right? If you can't tell. So it's, imagine reading that back in the day. It's prior to Christ's existence. But just so you understand, this was the history. This was the history that we had from the beginning. We read it in Genesis. We're in the book of Proverbs now, during the United Kingdom, approximately, right? Then you fast forward. We read about it in Matthew. We go into Colossians. We go all throughout the scriptures. We go into Revelations. It talks about the seed of David. The seed of Jesse, which was David's pops, right? Throughout the whole, that's why it says in the scriptures, I come in the what? Volume of the book. That might not hit us sometimes when we don't really go in and do our due diligence. But as you continue to read, and I'm just touching, even last time I touched on a few, right? It's just a few, but imagine how many accounts have we came across within, a lesson and a quarter of the accounts of Yahushua, right? And we're going to get into the secular accounts. But go ahead, read the next one, please.
God, the book of Shalakia. The book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 2, verse 42. Ezra saw upon the Mount Zion a great people, whom I could not number, and they all praised the Lord with songs. And in the midst of them there was a young man of high stature, taller than all the rest, and upon every one of their heads he set crowns, and was more exalted, which I marveled at greatly. Then said I unto the angel, what young person is this that crowneth them, and giveth them palms in their hands? So he answered and said to me, it is the Son of God, whom they have confessed in the world. I began greatly.
Hold up, read that again. The Son of God.
It is the Son of God, whom they have confessed in the world.
So what is this? Is this something that happened already? Has it? It hasn't, right? So now imagine Esdras. Esdras was the brother that was going through intervals, fasting, right? 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. He wanted to know more and more and more. The most I had to humble him, like, look, Esdras, you're so far apart, so departed from the spiritual way of things that you probably wouldn't even understand this. He was like, nah, but I wanna learn, I wanna know. So he said, all right, fast. He did that. Then he did that again. Then he did that again. He got different revelations, right? Different prophecies. So now this is what this is. This is something that's still to come. You read that in the New Testament, right? That these crowns are going to be placed upon who? All Israel? That 1/3 that you go back, also like in Zechariah and all throughout the Old Testament, right? So then read that last part again, please.
So he answered and said unto me, it is the Son of God, whom they have confessed in the world.
Have we not confessed Yahweh Shai in the world? Khan, right? So imagine, this is something that's going to happen in the future. And this is what the brother is being, there's the answer that he's receiving from the spirit, the angel, right? Look, it's Yahweh Shai, the one that the world has confessed, right? Continue on.
Then began I greatly to commend them that stood so stiffly for the name of the Lord.
Imagine that, right? Go ahead with the next one, Second Esdras.
2nd Ezra chapter 7 and verse 28. For my son Jesus shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years.
Had you guys read that? Had you seen that in the scripts? Nah? I know my older brothers have seen it for the most part. How about you, Rakab? What we just read in the book of Esdras in regards to Yahweh Shai. Khan, all right, all praises. So you see these accounts for the people that say that the Apocrypha is not canonical, right? Or it got nothing to do. It's a pseudo book. How was that? Besides that account, there's so many other accounts, right? But this right here is showing you Christ. Because remember, that's part of the Old Testament, the Apocrypha. Nothing new. But just to show you, like, we going from the beginning, we're going through the middle, Proverbs, now we in Esdras. What else do we have, Ak?
The book of John, chapter 4, verse 25. The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ.
I was tripping out on this one. Imagine being this person, right? Salak, read it from the top again.
The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. Yahweh Shai saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he.
Imagine that, right? Like for real though, imagine that. Imagine this sister's like, look, we're waiting for the Messiah. She's out here talking to the Jake. And he's like, look, you're looking at him. You're talking to him. Imagine how stunned she was. Man, the feeling at that moment, right? But again, showing you how even in his days, there were still people, obviously they knew, but they weren't knowing that he was there already. Who did know about that, though, on the last lesson that we covered, as far as the enemies? Y'all remember? Y'all were here? Who took the baby? Who? You said what? No? Who took the babies out? The Pharaoh or Herod? So yes, you got this Roman individual, right? People were in the knowing. People were in the knowing about him being here. As a matter of fact, I think we did cover it that day, but let's cover it again. Let's go to John 11. John 11 and get 47. Then we're going to come and finish these accounts. Check this out. John 11, read from 47 down to 52. 53.
The book of John, chapter 11, verse 47. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said,
Listen. So it says, then gathered the chief priests, Salakia, and the Pharisees in council, right? Also known as the Sanhedrin back in the day, the governing body of Israel, right? And they said what?
Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles.
Listen to this too. So it says, for this man doeth many miracles, right?
If we let...
Salakia. You got some. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Verse 48. If we let him thus alone.
Read that last part again, Salakia 47. For this man doth what?
Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him.
Listen to this, right? These are who again? Pharisees, Sadducees, the council, right? These are brothers that know the law. These are Israelites. So then they're saying, man, for this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, go ahead.
If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him.
Uh-huh.
And the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation.
Look at that. You see the setup, the lies, right? They're plotting. They're plotting. They're trying to figure out how to get rid of Christ. Go ahead.
And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people.
Okay, so the brother's bringing some correction to him, right? He says, man, y'all don't know what's going on. You know nothing at all. And then he says that this man is supposed to bring salvation, right, to the nation. Read that verse again, Aksalakia.
Verse 49. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not.
Listen to this. There's a couple of things you're going to get out of it. Continue.
Salaki, verse 41. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahushua should die for that nation.
All right, so this is the high priest, right? And he's saying, look, he's letting the people know, like, well, the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the council, this Jesus is supposed to die for the nation. So obviously he understands who this person is. Well, there's still people that doubt, although all the evidence is clear. He's like, look, he's confirming to him, look, this is Christ right here. Go ahead. 52.
Here it is, verse 52. And not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad.
So people might get confused right there, right? It's not only for Israel. Yes. He's talking not for that nation only, the Jews, Judah, right? In Jerusalem. We know the history, right? We go to 1 Kings 11, the split due to Solomon's transgression. 10 tribes were rent to the northern kingdom. 2 tribes were rent to the southern kingdom under Rehoboam, being Judah and, Judah and Benjamin. Levi was already within the mix, right? So he's like, look, I'm not just referring to Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, but also, right, to the children of the Most High that were scattered abroad. This is prophecy being fulfilled. This is the beginning of the 2 sticks coming back together, right? Go ahead. 53. 53? Yeah.
Then from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death.
So now they know who they're dealing with. They know that the prophecy is being fulfilled. That part of prophecy of our history is being fulfilled. But it's just to show you that in the days of our, of Hamashiach Yahushua under the Roman rulership, our people knew what was going on. Our people. That's why a lot of our Christian folks get confused and be like, oh, you a Jew? Aren't the Jews the ones that put Christ to death? Yes, it's in the Bible. But aren't the Jews also the ones that came and helped them and got them off the cross and did what they had to do? Yes. And weren't the disciples also Jews? Yes. People, throw things, some random stuff out without really understanding what they're saying. But that's why these classes are vital for y'all to take notes, really go back and understand our history and see how it all connects. I brought this out just to show how these Pharisees understood who they were dealing with. And still knowing that, they said, look, it says, then from that day forth, they took counsel together for to put him to death. Imagine that. Still knowing who he is, our people are still plotting on putting Yahushua to death. Like I said, it's 2, 3, 4-fold sometimes, these scriptures, these lessons. We're talking about the confirmation, the proof of Christ outside the scriptures. But just imagine that. Just to show you leadership. You got to look at leadership all the time. You got to look at who you are. You got to look at how you're mobbing, how you're walking, and really focus and see, well, hold up, am I that generation of vipers that Yahweh Shai attacked or actually corrected? Because look at these brothers right here, man. And we're going to go into that. One thing I said for y'all to remember was 47. It says, for this man doeth many miracles. We're going to cover that in some historical things right now. Go back and finish that up. Finish that up. Christ in the scriptures. Yes, sir.
The book of Hebrews, chapter 10, and verse 7. Then said I, lo, I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me to do thy will, O God.
Mm-hmm. Hold that right quick and let me get Psalms 40 and 7. Just so y'all can see it in the Old Testament as well.
The book of Psalm, chapter 40, and verse 7. Then said I, lo, I come in the volume of the book. It is written of me.
So you see, for all my only Old Testament only Bruce, right? In the volume of the book, where would you get the volume of the book in the New Testament? It's in the Old Testament. It's a reflection. It's the same thing, right? Things that followed after Christ is what you find in the New Testament for the most part, but still everything, the law and all the history is still the same that we find through the Torah, through the prophets, and our history in general. But again, these are things that we look, we read, and we still try to dismiss depending on our agendas. We should have no agenda but keeping the laws and really understanding what this book is about, right? With that, we got to understand that when we look at our Father prayer, we always got to pray in the name of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, being the mediator, being the door. It's only fair. Imagine everything that he's done and he's still doing, right? But go ahead and get the last couple up in the PowerPoint.
The book of Acts, chapter 3, and verse 18. But those things which God before has showed by the mouth of his prophets, that Christ should suffer, he hath so fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Get the last one.
The book of John, chapter 3, and verse 17. For God sent his Son into the world, Salakia, for God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved.
And like I said, those are a few. There's much more. You could say better ones. You look at Psalms, you look at Proverbs, you look at Isaiah. Isaiah talks about the whole get down on how Christ was going to be here, how his arrival was going to be, where he was going to be born, everything that was going to happen, right? But let's go to the PowerPoint, go to the next clip. So we look at this, right? Can you read that out?
Roman Emperor Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus.
Does anybody know who this is? Or why is he important? Yay, nay? All right. Well, he was the one that was in power during the time of Yahweh Shai, right? So when you look at this individual, Tiberius, right, he was the emperor. He was the emperor during the time of Christ, Christ's life, Christ's crucifixion. So when you look into it, there's about, approximately 10 or so sources talking in regards to this man. So it's confirmed that he existed. When you look at Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, there's way more sources that show that this brother actually lived and things that he did. There's different accounts. There's accounts that are not only from our people, but from enemy sources. When you look at enemy sources, a lot of times our people go to Psalms 83 and look outside the nation, right? We just read right now, who was the enemy source that we read about right now? Who were they? Y'all awake? Come on, I know it's been a rough week. We just read about the Pharisees, Sadducees, the council, right? They said since from that day, they plotted on how they were going to take Yahushua out. I know it might not make sense when we're reading it, but when you go into the scriptures, we're going to go into Matthew. Let's go there, as a matter of fact. Go to Matthew 16. Matthew 16, so you guys could understand what I'm talking about from Yahushua's mouth. I feel like, obviously, these precepts are necessary so it can make sense in our head. Let's see. You can read 16 and 1.
The book of Matthew, chapter 16, and verse 1. The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came, and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said unto them, when it is evening, ye say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering.
Go ahead.
O ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the signs of the times?
Imagine that. Yahushua was cold, right? The world thinks he was hugs and kisses. He was all love, whatever that is. 14:15 says, ye that love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. John also tells you the same thing, right? So he's letting you know right here, look, ye hypocrites, you can't discern the face of the sky, kind of like your meteorologists and stuff like that, right? But it says, but can ye not discern the signs of the times? Go ahead, read 4.
A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. And he left them and departed.
So he gave them some game. He put them on game. He checked them. He corrected them and jetted out, right? Cold brother. Cold brother. Not that depiction that they have in the, what was that flick? The Passion of Christ. None of that. But jump down to 12. Verse 12.
Verse 12. Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of the bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
But of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Why am I going here? Christ is breaking it down right there. He was talking to the disciples like, look, peep this out. And he's talking about, you know, the bread and so forth, right? And they're out here thinking about actual bread, right? When you say, have you had your daily bread? It's not talking about the actual physical bread that we eat, but this right here. So then he says, they understood how that he bade them to beware of the leaven, right? The leaven of bread of what? But, Salakia, let me get that again. How that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, the actual bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. When I was talking and referring to the enemies, our main enemies is us, for the most part. Before the nations destroy us, we're destroying each other. We're reading about this right here. That's why people get caught up with so many doctrines. It's so confusing. Well, if you become humble enough and obey and start following the law for what it is, that confusion will disappear. It's right here. Because you'll read and be like, oh, okay. Damn, it's been like that. Damn, there was camps back then. Sadducees, Pharisees, Silods, so forth, right? Sicarios, whatever you want to call them. And I mean, the list goes on. Nothing new. You look at the churches. There was at least 7 churches, correct? Every church was different. Every church has some pros and some cons. You be out here in a camp like, damn, how come there's so much frictions? How come, you know, we lack this, we lack that? I look at it like, man, that could be right here, us, True Nation. We'll be one of the many churches depending on the season you catch us in. What do? We need to correct ourselves. But I'm bringing all this to understand once we go into these things, how this knowledge was there. They knew, we read in John 11, that they were certain that Christ was here. The Messiah was here. The story, the account of the lady, right? that was like, man, look, this is prophecy that this brother's going to come through one day. And he's like, man, you're looking at him. You're talking to him. What's up? All that was present. So now we're looking at accounts outside of the scriptures. So in the days of Tiberius, right, this is when Christ was put to death. There's over 40 accounts of Hamashiach Yahushua existing outside of the Bible. There's about 10 that talk in regard that focus on this individual right here. So imagine, this was a powerful man. Anybody that you ask about and that knows some history, they're going to know who Tiberius was. But also these scholars, if they're really scholars of history, they're going to know about these few accounts that we're going to bring out this evening. But so go ahead. That was the importance of this individual. Continue on, Art. Yeah. Go ahead and get
Titulus Venetius. It has been established that the taking of a census was quite common at about the time of Christ. An ancient Latin inscription called Titulus Venetius or Venetus indicates that a census took place in Syria and Judea around 5 to 6 AD, and that this was typical of those Salakia. And that this was typical of those held throughout the Roman Empire from the time of Augustus, 23 BC to 8014, until at least the 3rd century. 3rd century AD. It indications are that this census took place every 14 years. Other such evidence indicates that these procedures were widespread. Concerning persons returning to their home city for taxation and census, an Egyptian papyrus dating from AD 104 reports just such a practice.
All right, y'all listening, right? Side note, ain't it funny how that happens in America still? Don't we get those censuses every now and then? Right? Aren't we taxed around the springtime every year? Right? These are things you got to put together when you're studying. To see how, remember, this is just the little horn that comes from the Roman Empire. Going back to this, right? So it's telling you that this was something that they were doing. Continue on, Art.
It is known that Quirinius was made governor of Syria by Augustus in AD 6. Or 6 AD. Archaeologist Sir William Ramsay discovered several inscriptions that indicated that Quirinius was the governor of Syria on 2 occasions. The first time several years prior to this date.
Jump down to the last part.
Archaeology also assists us in establishing several facts. 1, a taxation census was a fairly common procedure in the Roman Empire and did occur in Judea in particular. 2, persons were required to return to their home city in order to fulfill requirements of the process. 3, these procedures were apparently employed during the reign of Augustus, 37 BC to AD or 14 AD, placing it well within the general time frame of Yahushua's birth. And 4, the date of the specific taxation recounted by Luke could very possibly be between 6 and 5 BC, which would also be of service in attempting to find a more exact date for Yahushua's birth.
You see that? That's a couple of the accounts. One of the few accounts. I'm going to say few because we're not covering too many. But let's go to Luke. Y'all familiar with that already, right? What happened in the book of Luke? But let's go ahead and get it. See how it matches up. Luke 2 and 1.
The book of Luke, chapter 2 and verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria.
Did we not just read that from a secular source? Right? Go ahead, Art.
And all went to be taxed, everyone in his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. To
Continue.
be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child.
Go ahead, 6.
And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered.
You see that, right? Accounts from the scriptures confirm with world history, right? Let's go to the next one.
James Oshuary, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. In 2002, Oded Golan, a known collector and expert in Israeli antiquities, contacted Professor Andre Lemaire, the great Semitic epigraphist in the world, the greatest Semitic epigraphist in the world, based at Sorbonne University, Paris, to show him a series of valuable pieces, and in particular to get some expert advice on a small ossuary dating back approximately to the 1st century, which he had purchased many years earlier. Lemaire was quite impressed noticing the inscription on the ossuary, Yaakov Bar Yosef Aki de Yeshua, or James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. According to philologists, scholars of ancient Hebrew, and archaeologists who studied the ossuary, it actually dates back to the 1st century.
Look at that, right? So, let me see, I'm trying to get that script real quick. Let me know if you have it. I'm looking for, talks about his brothers.
Let me see.
Mark 6.
Mark 6.
Yeah, 6 and 3.
The book of Mark, chapter 6, and verse 3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James?
The what?
The brother of James,
Uh-huh.
and Joseph, and Judah, and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him.
So you see that, right? This James Ossuary, what is it talking about? Who did it name right there, right? Read that from the top again, or read that part.
Verse 3, is not this the carpenter?
No, I'm back on the PowerPoint.
Oh, Salakia. It says, Lemaire was quite impressed noticing the inscription on the ossuary, Yaakov Bar Yosef Aki de Yeshua, or James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus.
See that, right? Yes? No? Let's go to the next one. And y'all could just take notes as far as, everything that we're covering, but like I said, it's going to be a quick, straight to the point accounts outside of the scriptures. Now we have this decree. Whenever you're ready,
The Nazareth Decree, translated as follows. Ordinance of Caesar. It is my pleasure that graves and tombs remain perpetually undisturbed for those who have made them for the cult of their ancestors or children or members of their house. If, however, anyone charges that another has either demolished them or has displaced the ceiling on other stones against...
Salakia, why do you think we're going here? Why would this be important? In regards to the last thing we just covered. So this is a decree, right? And it says, Ordinance of Caesar. It is my pleasure that graves and tombs remain perpetually undisturbed for those who have made them for the cult of their ancestors or children or members of their house. What did Esau do after that? But we had enough time, right? When we read Revelations last time, we covered this lesson. And we said how the world was going to help the woman. The earth was going to help the woman. The earth being what? Archaeology. The woman being who? Us, Israel, right? So how everything how it's laid out, right? The Most High is so on point with everything. He's like, look, this decree went forth. This decree went forth. So things like the ossuary that we read about right now wouldn't be destroyed. Even like back in the day when you read from Exodus, when our forefathers left Egypt, came out of there, what would they always carry with them in regards to our ancestors? Who? The bones, right? The bones, and they would take them to wherever we was at, like Modin, for example. If you look at Modin, there was a place that was purchased, right? And also, what was the name of the place that what was it, Abraham? Was it Abraham that bought it? Not the well, but where all the ancestors were buried. Was it Jacob? Well, whenever you read the history, I forget right now, but our people had that as a custom, right? For our people to have particular sites where we and our peoples, our families, our lineage were placed after death. So these are things that were occurring since way back in the book of Genesis. Now we're in the days of Rome, and this, such decree went forth to show and prove for all the naysayers. Who's to say that that wasn't a setup? Because that's what people always do, right? Is that authentic? Or was that a setup? Was that something that was fabricated? You look at the Luna's Decalogue, something that was found in the 1800s, right? In the 1800s in New Mexico. People go and debate that and be like, nah, you know what? That was a setup. That was carved, Then you look at the stone, the Moshe stone. I seen somebody just posted something else that was just recently found, also in regards to Moses, the Decalogue, and so forth. But somebody, a naysayer, is always going to try to contest that, saying that it was a replica, that is phony, and so forth. But we're go back to the PowerPoint now, I can finish that, showing you how there was decrees, laws placed to prove and confirm that these things that we're going into, that we're bringing out, are actually authentic and factual. But read that again out.
Ordinance of Caesar, it is my pleasure that graves and tombs remain perpetually undisturbed for those who have made them for the cult of their ancestors or children or members of their house. If, however, anyone charges that another has either demolished them or displaced the ceiling of their stones, against such a one, I order that a trial be instituted as in respect of the gods, so in regards to the cult of mortals. For it shall be much more obligatory to honor the buried. Let it be absolutely forbidden for anyone to disturb them. In case of violation, desire that the offender be sentenced to capital punishment on charge of the violation of the sepulcher.
Imagine that, right? Capital punishment. Y'all heard that term before, right? So it wasn't light. It wasn't something like to mess with and get away with. Bringing this out for that particular piece that we cover right now, but also let's go into the scriptures right here that we have at the bottom, so you could understand also how important it was for this brother Joseph to come through and do what he did. Go ahead and get 16 and 1 in the book of Mark. Actually, go to Matthew first, and then we'll go to Mark. Matthew 27. We'll probably just cover one.
The book of Matthew, chapter 27,
6 deuce.
and verse 62. Now the next day that followed the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, he is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first.
You see, even after his death, how they're still plotting to try to get away with things. I don't know if you guys understand. They're like, look, man, so things don't go farther left than what they already are. Let's go make sure that nobody comes and tries to remove the body to confirm the actual prophecy, right? Just showing you how disconnected our people were. But go ahead.
Command therefore, Salakia, verse 65. Pilate said unto them, ye have a watch. Go your way. Make it as sure as you can. So they went and made the sepulcher sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch.
So that's just showing you as far as how they were so connected and plotting and trying to make sure that this didn't go down. But yet, you look at this decree, right? These decrees were set so these things wouldn't happen. But you see how Israel is always trying to make a way. Now we blame Esau on a lot of these things. But half the time it's still us. Half the time it's still us trying to disprove ourselves, disprove our history, I mean. Right? So these are things that you look into. We're not going to go into the next, the other scriptures that are listed. They're talking in regards to the same. But when you look at our custom, our tradition was to make sure that we went ahead and put our people to rest. Burning our people really wasn't something that we practiced. That's why you read about Tobit I think it was last Sabbath. You know what Tobit was doing? Tobit was risking his life to make sure that these people were placed in, proper, they had the proper burial, right? But I brought that out just for that, kind of connected with this, connected, to what was going on, but also as far as the ossuary that we read about right now. Go to the next one, huh? And this is where they came across that particular piece, Go ahead, read that.
James Ossuary, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. After more than 5 years, the forgery trial of the century concluded.
You see that? You see why that's important? It said the what?
The forgery trial of the century.
Right, the forgery trial of the century. Why? Why would that be anything to even consider, right? Always trying to disprove the facts. Always trying to disprove that earth helping the woman, right? So it says, after more than 5 years, the forgery trial of the century, what?
Concluded in a Jerusalem courtroom, and defendants Oded Golan and Robert. The trial concluded with the acquittal of antiquities dealer and James Ossuary owner Oded Golan and the other defendants on all charges of forgery, though Golan was convicted of minor charges including trading in antiquities without a license. The inscription reading James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, has been authenticated by two eminent paleographers, specialists in dating, interpreting, and authenticating inscriptions, Andre Lemaire of Sorbonne and Adai Yardenai of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Imagine that, right? 5 years in trial. 5 years trying to disprove these artifacts. Just to show you how Satan's always going to try to contend against the truth. But, again, the Most High always, he already said it. He said it from the beginning. He confirms it in Revelations, right? The earth was going to help the woman. Confirmation right there. Just like anything else. You look at the Bible dictionary, for example. There's this whole situation going down about Ham, right? They switch it up. If you look at an old dictionary, one of the elders had a dictionary back in the day. I don't know who by who, but I remember the post, and it actually broke down Caucasian. And under Caucasian, it was subhuman species. You go and look under Caucasian now, they don't say that anymore. Why? Because he's like, damn, they're reading now. We gotta put that away. We gotta delete that. You look at certain books that we have. Sometimes it's not even wise to name them, because as soon as you name them, it was probably an $18 book. There's an atlas that was about $18 back in the day. That atlas went up to about $200 or more dollars. It recently came back down, but imagine from an 18, that brothers just, that's show you how they listen. They be listening in. You look at everything nowadays as far as, your phones and so forth. They're picking up on everything. Why? Because the scriptures in Revelations 1 and 3 tells you, blessed is he that readeth, right? As soon as we start reading, they make sure they try to disappear. You try to do away with those things, and if not doing away with them, they make them so expensive that our people can't afford them. But again, after 5 years, it was authenticated. Imagine that. That was kind of fast if you ask me, compared to other things. But going back to every step that was to be considered to come to this conclusion, right? And then at the end, it said the same thing that we read about earlier. James, right, talking about the brother of Yahushua, son of Joseph. Next one out.
The Yochanan crucifixion. In the history of the crucifixion, the death of Jesus of Nazareth stands out as the best known example by far. Crucifixion in antiquity was actually a fairly common punishment.
Fairly what?
A fairly common punishment.
Common punishment for my brothers and sisters that like rocking that cross on their neck. You're rocking a common punishment. Imagine that. It's like rocking a damn what do you call it? A branch with a rope, right? From back in the 50s, 60s, and so forth, or the electric chair, or the gas chamber. I know it kind of sounds like, why am I talking about it? Just so you could understand, like, there's no reason for you to be doing that. It was a form of punishment that our people were facing along with, other folks. But go ahead.
It was a fairly common punishment, but there was no physical remains from a crucifixion. Then, in 1968, archaeologist Vasilios Zafaris excavated a Jerusalem tomb that contained the bones of a crucified man named Yehohanan. The history of crucifixion extends as far back as the Assyrians, Phoenicians, and Persians in 1st millennium BC, as well as some Greeks throughout the Hellenized world. Even so, the most detailed accounts are of Roman crucifixion methods. Despite the long history of crucifixion in antiquity, the discovery of Yehohanan's remains offered scientists the first opportunity to study the process of crucifixion and Roman crucifixion methods up close. The bones were found in an ossuary, or a bone box, inscribed several times with Yehohanan's name, Yehohanan, the son of Hagakal.
So you see that again, how there was still other traces left behind. All praises to the Most High. And now they're confirming how crucifixion was a common way of, a common punishment to our people and just in general in the Roman Empire. Go ahead.
This ossuary, along with several others, had been placed in a tomb complex consisting of 2 chambers and 12 burial niches. During the Roman period, 1st century BC to 1st century AD, Jews who could afford this type of burial would lay out the dead bodies of loved ones on a stone bench in rock-cut tombs. A year later, after the flesh had desiccated, the bones were collected into an ossuary and left in the tomb with those of the other family members. Examination of Yehohanan's bones showed one of the many Roman crucifixion methods. Both of his feet were nailed together to the cross with a wooden plaque, while his legs were bent to one side. His arm bones revealed scratches where the nails had passed between. Both his legs were badly fractured, most likely from the crushing blow meant to end the suffering and bring about a faster death. Yehohanan was probably a political dissident against Roman oppression. In death, his bones have helped fill the gaps in the history of crucifixion.
God, let me pull up the scripture right quick. Let me get Matthew 27 and 57.
The book of Matthew, chapter 27.
Remember what it said, right? Only what type of Jews were able to afford this? Obvious. Wealthy Jews, right? This particular method. Wealthy Jews. We read that, right? All right, so let's get Matthew 27.
The book of Matthew, chapter 27 and verse 57. When the even was come, there was a rich man of Arimathea.
A rich man,
named Joseph, who also himself was Yahushua's disciple.
Go ahead.
He went to Pilate and begged the body of Yahushua. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door or the sepulchre and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre.
Go ahead.
Now the next day that followed, the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said while he was yet alive that after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day.
So now, just bringing that back to let you understand how everything was so in order with the Most High, that this man Joseph, a rich man, had to come to be able to have the Yahushua, be in that particular situation, which is said right here was also his disciple. Earlier in the PowerPoint we read, after how long would they come in and take the bones from this particular sepulcher? Anybody remember? If you could go back to it, I think it was like 19 or something like that. Probably more than that, because obviously it's going to take a minute.
Longer than that. 1 second.
But just the point that I'm bringing out with that is the whole setup was from a wealthy stand, right? They're like, look, the least we could do for this brother is make sure that he has the proper burial. In the upper class of Israel, Joseph came through, a rich man, right? Set that up. And then they put the rock. But the only difference was that what happened to Christ in 3 days? He rose. We read about that in Esdras, that no man had done that. So it's showing you, bam, that prophecy, it was fulfilled in those days, right? But just to show you, did you get that fact out? How many days or years, whatever?
It says, Jews who could afford this type of burial would lay out the dead body of loved ones on a stone bench in rock-cut tombs. A year later, after the flesh had desiccated, the bones were collected into an ossuary and left in the tomb with those of other family members.
So there you go. Because people might be like, well, where are his bones at? They forget, what happened to Christ? He rose, and then what? He ascended, right? He went into the heavens with the Most High. So just to show you though how, yeah, of course, you got his brothers, you got other Jews back then. But if that would have been the case, a year later, the process would have been what it was with what we read right now. But just, things that you got to look at when you're doing your research and look into. And also know, because there's going to be a lot of naysayers coming your way, no matter what, no matter how many facts you pull up. But go to the next one, all right?
Phlegon. Phlegon was born about AD 80.
So these are some historians now that we're covering. Go ahead.
He was a secular historian who lived in the 2nd century. There are 2 books credited to his name, Phlegon's reference to Christ. And with regard to the eclipse in the time of Tiberius Caesar, in whose reign Yahushua appears to have been crucified, and the great earthquakes which then took place.
You guys remember that, right? During his death? So now imagine that. These are things, these are great things. We remember the 94 quake, anybody that was alive back then. There's books, there's documentaries and so forth, right? Now they're talking about this particular eclipse or particular situation that happened while Yahushua gave up the ghost. So like, I'll go ahead and read that again.
The first one?
Yeah.
And with regard to the eclipse in the time of Tiberius Caesar, in whose reign Yahushua appears to have been crucified, and the great earthquakes which then took place. Phlegon mentions the eclipse which took place during the crucifixion of the Lord Yahushua, and no other eclipse. It is clear that he did not know from his source about the similar eclipse in previous times, and this is shown by the historical accounts of Tiberius Caesar. Phlegon records that
In the time of Tiberius Caesar, at full moon, there was a full eclipse of the sun.
Hold up. At what? At
In
what
the time of Tiberius, at full moon, there was a full eclipse of the sun from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. Manifestly, that one of which we speak. But what has an eclipse in common with an earthquake? The rending rocks and the resurrection of the dead, and so great perturbation throughout the universe. And calculations makes out the period of 70 weeks, as noted in Daniel, is completed at this time. Julius Africanus.
You see that? And read about that, Matthew 27, when that took place. Also Matthew 26 through 28, showing you exactly when Yahushua passed. It was during the day of Passover, right? The daytime, the light time of Passover. So in the evening, they prepped up. He was keeping Pesach, the Last Supper that you guys see in your granny's, walls and so forth. That was the Last Supper, the Pesach, Passover. At that time, they sell them out, right? They come through and they pick them up. The next day, about 3 p.m., he gives up the ghost. This is about the account that we're reading about right now. When you go into 27 and can you get that, Matthew 27? And you can start at 45.
God. The book of Matthew, chapter 27, and verse...
Start at 44.
45, 43?
44.
44. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over the land until the 9th hour.
About 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Go ahead.
And about the 9th hour Yahushua cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, this man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, let be, let us see whether Elias will come and save him. Yahushua, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake.
Remember he said that to the sister, right? He said in 3 days. Everybody was tripping out, like, what are you talking about? You're going to destroy the house of God? They didn't comprehend. It's taking place right here. It says, right, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain in two, from the top to the bottom, destroyed. Go ahead. And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. Go ahead.
And the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose.
Go ahead.
And came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many.
Look at that, right? But showing you what we're reading about right here. From a historical account, a secular historian, not a Jew, not a Christian, somebody just in the world that's documenting stuff, but showing you that this happened. This great event, there's proof that this happened during the reign and during Yahushua. The time that Yahushua existed, the time that Yahushua gave up the ghost, right? Go to the next one, Ak.
Tacitus. The Roman historian and senator Tacitus referred to Jesus. His Cornelius Tacitus, circa 55 to 120 AD, was a Roman historian who lived through the reigns of over half a dozen Roman emperors. A Roman emperor's execution by Pontius Pilate, and the existence of the early Christians in Rome in his final work, Annals, written in AD 116, Book 15, Chapter 44. The scholarly consensus is that Tacitus's reference to the execution of Yahushua by Pontius Pilate is both authentic and historical, and of historical value as an independent Roman source. The passage in its context, the Annals, passage 1544, which has been subjected to much scholarly analysis, follows a description of the 6-day great fire of Rome that burned much of Rome in July 64 AD The key part of the passage reads as follows. Translation from Latin by A.J. Church. But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief, nor the conflagration was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations.
Listen to this, right? It says the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations.
Called Christians by the populace.
Always familiar, right? Read The Devastation of the Indies, the same thing. Willie Lynch Letter, the same things. You look at the movies. What's that one flick? Goodbye, Uncle Sam. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. If you haven't checked that out, I said it last time. Check that out. You might be really upset at the end. You will be upset at the end if you could go through the whole thing. But it says right here, right? The most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations called Christians. Go ahead.
Called Christians. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius.
Slow down. Let me get that again. So it says, Christians by the populace, by society, right? The same thing. These blacks and browns, right? So, and then it says, by the populace, right? Then it says, Christus, from whom the name had its origin. It says, suffer the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius. Did we not cover that at the beginning? This is another source, Tacitus. Tacitus, I mean. So it says, at the hands of one of the procurators, Pontius Pilate, or Pilatus, how it's read right here, how it's written out here. So another proof, another source, telling you the same thing. Where it says right here, Christus, from whom the name had its origin. We have that in the book of, what is it, Acts? Let's get it right quick. You guys following?
Acts 11.
Acts 11 and 26.
The book of Acts chapter 11 and verse 26. And when he had found them, he brought him unto Antioch, and it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught many people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch.
You see that? They were called Christians first in Antioch. For all our people that, I'm not a Jew, I'm a Christian. Well, these brothers were what? Jews. That were first called Christians in Antioch, right? Connect the dots, people, please. So now it's saying right here, Christus, from whom the name had its origin. Read that again, Ike.
Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme. You want me to start?
Yeah, right there. You're good.
God suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of evil, but even in Rome.
What happened? Just read it.
But even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular.
We'll leave it at that. I want to read that, though. So you can understand when we connect a lot of the things that America still practices comes from this place, comes from, you know, Granddaddy Esau, the one that set everything up. But again, another source showing you and proving to you that Christ existed. Go ahead, next. Remember, these are historians.
Tacitus then describes the torture of Christians. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to flames and burnt, to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired.
And what they said, it was a representation of Christ and his disciples. You know, I'm not certain if it was a dozen or 13, but it was a representation of our forefathers. To a point that one of the brothers, one of the natives, they were like, you want to be a Christian? And he's like, do Christians go to heaven? Yay. Nah, I'd rather go to hell. You read that in the book. It was that treacherous. It's been that treacherous. But just showing you. That's why we read that little section at the end, showing you that where everything originated. Not so much where, but from the people, right? All the enemies of Israel. But again, another source. I'm going to get these right quick. And this is, I don't think I put it in this, but it's from the Babylonian Talmud, right? Let me get it right quick. So this is Shabbat 104b. It says, Jesus was a magician and a fool. Talmud. Right? That's not, you could call it, it's an enemy source in a sense. When you look at Pharisees, Sadducees, were they pro Yahushai or anti Yahushai? Right? So this is off of the Babylonian Talmud, right? So it says in, you can look it up, Shabbat 104b, it says Jesus was a magician and a fool. So if Jesus did not exist, would somebody that would want his existence not to be, what we read in the book of John 11, right? They said from that day they plotted to eliminate him. So if that was the case, if Yahushua didn't exist, why would there be accounts of him from somebody that hated him? Right? This is just where it's coming from. That's Shabbat 104. This is the Sanhedrin 107b of the Babylonian Talmud. It says, Jesus performed magic and incited the people of Israel and led them astray. Right? Then Sanhedrin 43a. On Passover Eve, they hang Jesus, or Jeshua, as is written in the Talmud, of Nazareth. He practiced sorcery, incited, and led Israel astray. At least 3 accounts in the Talmud. Besides the other sources that we're reading, the accounts that we're reading of right now. But continue on with the PowerPoint art. This is one of our brothers right here. If you don't have the book, copy it. Josephus, it's a bunch of history in there. A bunch of, history of the wars. But go ahead and get that.
Flavius Josephus, a Jewish priest who grew up as an aristocrat in first-century Palestine and ended up living in Rome, supported by the patronage of 3 successive emperors in the early days of the first Jewish revolt from 66 to 70 CE. Josephus was a commander in Galilee, but soon surrendered and became a prisoner of war. He then prophesied that his conqueror, the Roman commander Vespasian, would become emperor, and when it actually happened, Vespasian freed him. From then on, Josephus lived in Rome under the protection of the Flavians, and there composed his historical apologetic writings.
All right, so this is some of the history, right? And our people, what do they usually do with this, Daraj? What do they say about Josephus in the sources?
He was a traitor.
And that is not, right? It's not factual, whatever.
Right.
Again, any source that you pull up, regardless, you're going to have Pharisees, Sadducees, the council, and so forth. The same naysayers, the same generation of vipers back then that didn't believe are going to be the same individuals you talk to nowadays with the same mentality. But go ahead.
In Josephus's Jewish Antiquities in Book 18 that refers to Yahushai is known as the Testimonium Flavianum. It reads as follows. Around this time there lived Yahushai, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was one who did surprising deeds, and a great teacher of such people as accepted the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah.
Hold up. Look at that right there. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. We don't read that in the New Testament. Our people get hella confused with that, right? There's no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Just to show you the accounts. So we were talking, that's how, you know, our historians, our brothers back in the day, they jotted it down knowing, it's like saying there was no difference, you know, that he won over several blacks and Hispanics, right? Or Mexicans and Dominicans, Jamaicans and Belizeans. Same difference, right? Go ahead.
He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the higher standing among us, had condemned him to be crucified. Those who in the first place came to love him did not give up their affection for him. For on the third day he appeared to them and restored to life. The prophets of God had prophesied this and countless other marvelous things about him. The tribe of Christians, so called after him, have still to this day not died out.
So look at this. These are accounts from after Christ, right? A couple years later. You have right here, it says 66 to 70 CE. So this is an account from our brother Josephus, and I think we have one more. Go to the next one.
From the Quran. Muslims believe that the Quran was orally revealed by God to the so-called final prophet Muhammad through the archangel Gabriel, incrementally over a period of some 23 years, beginning in the month of Ramadan. When Muhammad was 40 and concluding in 632, the year of his death, shortly after the prophet's death, the Quran was compiled by the companions who had written down or memorized parts of it. Muslim acknowledges Yahushua, peace be upon him, as one of the greatest prophets in Islam. In the Quran, God Almighty mentions Yahushua by name no less than 34 times. 26 times as Jesus, 8 times as the Messiah. 9 and 31, they have taken their scholars. They have taken their scholars and monks as lords beside Allah and also the Messiah, the son of Mary. And they were not commanded except to worship one God. There is no deity except him. Exalted is he above whatever they associated with him. 3 and 84. Say, we have believed in Allah and in what was revealed to us and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the descendants, and in what was given to Moses and Yahushua and to the prophets to Jesus and to the prophets of their Lord. We make no distinction between any of them. The Messiah, son of 5 and 75. The Messiah, son of Mary, was not but a messenger. Other messengers have passed on before him, and his mother was a supporter of truth. They both used to eat food. Look how we make clear to them the signs. Then look how they are deluded.
So you see, right? Even other, when you look at the Crusades, for example, one of the main enemies were who? The Muslims. But even in their books, right, the Quran, you see it says 34 times, 26 times as Jesus, and 8 times as the Messiah. No matter how what source you look at, you could find Yahushua. I was trying to find this other one in Josephus. I know I have the note right here, but I can't find it in, I think it's a book, in 20, I think it's paragraph 29 and paragraph 1, but can't come across it. It also refers to Yahushua called Christ, James' brother. So that's another account. There's 2 accounts in the book of Josephus in regards to Yahushua. We'll go to the next one. No, but was that it? There's one more, right? Okay, cool. Well then, again, various accounts that you could go through from different sources that show you that Christ was not a myth. Like we said last time, he was a man and he was a legend, our Savior, our King, right? So I hope this was, helpful for our brothers and our sisters. Go back, scope it out, and as you do your studies, you're going to come across way more sources, even scriptures. As you go into your, your studies, you're going to understand more how great this man was. That was literally a man, how we read in Hebrews last time, 7 and 14, of the tribe of Judah. But with that, we conclude this evening's lesson. Most High willing, it was edifying, and hope you guys join us tomorrow at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time to, for the closing of the Sabbath. With that, Shalom. Any announcements?